I'm Greg, and you're listening to Totally Preventable.
Totally preventable.
Totally preventable.
Totally preventable. Totally preventable.
Totally preventable.
Totally preventable.
So, Polly, today we are going to animals.
Yeah.
Yes, we are. Headed to the animals, and our guest today is Brad Shear from the Potters League.
Oh, that's exciting.
It is exciting. It is exciting. I'm curious to know exactly what goes on over there. I know they've been affiliated with so many rescues that we see on TV and natural disasters and things along that nature, and they're really taking in a lot. I'm really curious to hear what goes on and what's their process.
Yeah. I know they're out there in the community when we do community events. I see them out there, which is great.
Yeah, they had some cool shirts
They do.
and clothing at last time I saw them.
Was it at Pride?
It was at Pride. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I wanted like everything that they had on display.
Yep.
I was like, oh, that looks good. That looks nice.
They had a great booth.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. They were at our wellness fair as well.
They were,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Didn't they have a big, was it Dalmatian for them?
It was a big Dalmatian. I forgot what the contest was. He had to name it, but yeah, it was a great group.
I wonder if he knows what won, what
Yeah.
new spot.
We'll have to figure that out.
Yeah.
I hope it wasn't Spot. That's just cop out. No creativity on it. If that was the name that won, I'd be like, wow.
We'll ask him that question first, and then if that's the answer, we'll just hang up.
We'll just throw them off
Yeah.
completely.
And that's been Brad. See you later, Brad.
So without further ado, all right, today with us, we have the CEO of Potter League, Mr. Brad Shear. Brad, thank you very much for joining us today on Totally Preventable.
I'm happy to be here.
That is great. That is great. We've been here at the office really, really buzzing about this interview. We all have a lot of questions that we want to ask, and we're sure that the community abroad really wants to know as well. So thank you very much. And to
No pressure.
Can we ask Brad? We saw in your signature on your email, it said CAWA. So we've been, while we're sitting, we've come up with it. Cat and Whisker Association.
Okay, that's a good one. So CAWA stands for Certified Animal Welfare Administrator. So I'm a member of an organization called the Association for Animal Welfare Advancement, which is our national professional association. I'm actually on the board of the association. I'm the immediate past chair, so I am ending my board term next month after 7 years. And the association has a certification program, similar to other professional certifications. If you're, all sorts of professions have it, and there's only about 250 of us internationally. So we're an association for the US, Canada, Australia, that we have some British members, and I think we have a few in the Virgin Islands now. And so there, to give you a perspective, there's about 8,000 animal shelters just in the US. About 250 of us with the certification, but it's, we're really working on that and growing the value of the certification.
What is the process to become certified?
So there's the pre-qualifying is to have a certain number of years of service at a level where you are, in my position as CEO, or report to that person, a certain number of years in the industry. Then there's an exam that you take. And then which a lot of people don't pass the first time around, where there are a lot of two-time exam takers like myself. And then once you have the certification, you have to recertify every 3 years, which is primarily with continuing education. So we have a minimum amount of continuing education we have to keep doing every year.
And you said experience in the field and years of experience in the field. What would be considered in the field? Is that like vets? Is that different rescue?
It's really in animal welfare. So whether they're both nonprofit and governmental animal shelter agencies, and nonprofit veterinary hospitals. I don't believe that if you were, say, a veterinarian in a private typical clinic, that would qualify. It's really doing sort of this, whether it's charitable or governmental animal welfare work.
All right. Thanks.
So would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved in this, what drew you to
Sure.
this calling?
Yeah, so in February, I will have been in animal welfare for 28 years.
Oh,
Started at the Humane Society in Boulder, Colorado. I had been managing restaurants before this. I'd always had a love for animals since I was a kid, grew up with animals, and honestly just didn't know that this work existed before I got into it. I just wasn't happy doing what I was doing. I was looking for something that contributed more to the community, and the animal shelters back then weren't great at taking care of people. We were pretty good at taking care of animals. So the local shelter was really looking for people with sort of a service background, helping people, which was my background. I trained people in customer service at a few different restaurants that somebody owned, who I worked for. And so that's how I initially got my foot in the door. And then I just did every job I could do to learn how it worked. So I worked at the front desk in the kennels. I ran an animal control department. So I was a cruelty investigator, an animal control officer. I've run shelters in a small city like Boulder, or worked at them. And I worked in New York City, animal care and control in Atlanta. Most recently, before coming to the Potter League, I was at the animal shelter in Albany, New York. So again, sort of a mid-sized city where we had animal control contracts and we were cruelty investigators, and have been at the Potter League for 5 years. So just, sort of a long career working in the field, trying to do a lot of different things. I think the Potter League just was attractive because of the tremendously supportive community and the great stability and potential that we have to help the community. And along the way through that journey, I got a wife and a couple kids and some cats and a dog.
Oh, how many?
All that too.
Dogs?
Currently 3 cats and a dog,
wow.
and 6 fish.
Wow.
Couple kids, and
All rescues.
That's
that's
awesome.
enough.
Yeah.
That's enough things I have to keep alive.
Yeah. Wow. So you mentioned cruelty investigator. Would you say that was the most difficult part of the job, or?
That's a challenging job because, sometimes it feels like you don't get the sort of an enriching fun part. Here, there can be challenges, but there are also great victories. And usually when you're doing that kind of work, the victory part is often long delayed. And it can be challenging because there are times when you're a law enforcement officer, but you're in a situation where you don't really want to use the legal system to solve a problem, and sort of we're trying to find other tools which are not as easily accessible to solve an issue. You have a person. You're usually working with someone who's got multiple. The animals aren't the only issue that's going on. There's all kinds of other problems probably just like the work you do. You can't zero in on one issue, even though we're focused on the animals. And so does writing this person a ticket or seizing animals or, arresting someone, does that really solve a problem? Or it just changes one very limited piece. It can be hard to get to, for me, both getting myself and also the people who are working for me out of this framework of, well, I'm just going to do the thing that's easiest and most accessible to me and what the community expects, right? They just want me to come and enforce the law and walk away. And it's much harder to access sort of mental health services and, get people connected to human service agencies that are going to help them with whether it could be childcare or, food pantry or, all these other services that are really at the root of problems, instead of just solving what's most in front of you. But the victories can be longer delayed than, say, when you're working in the animal shelter, you take in an animal, you treat them, within a couple of weeks, usually they find a home, and, almost every day there's an animal going home. And so you have this constant reinforcement that work is, you're constantly getting this positive thing. You might get something difficult, but, within half an hour, somebody else is going home and you get this positive thing. The law enforcement part, often the feel good part can be more difficult to see and longer delayed. And it's probably, I worked with a lot of police, and probably, I'm not a police officer, never have been, but it's probably challenging for them too, for the ones who really want to solve real problems, that the solutions are much harder to access than real solutions are harder for them to access.
Right. Wow.
Hmm.
Now, what at the Potters League, I know you said the community's very involved here, and they had that stable foundation. What is the vision of the Potters League?
Yeah, so at the core, we are about building and maintaining the human animal bond. We feel like our sweet spot is where people connect with animals, and we want those animals to be safe wherever they are in our community and healthy. So whether that's in the animal shelter where we are caring directly for them, or in a home where we help people to make sure that they can get what they need to care for their own animals. We just want all animals to be safe and healthy, and everyone in our community who wants to have a pet to have the ability to have one. So we want to break down barriers for people to be able to obtain a pet, but also then keep them in their home, because we feel like that human animal bond, we evolved as to be humans in part because of our interaction with animals. Our connection to pets is sort of ingrained in us, and we are who we are because in part we have this connection to animals in the world. And we feel like if you want to have that connection, you should be able to, no matter who you are or what your living situation is or your financial situation, you should be able to access them, which is why we have programs like our food pantry and low cost veterinary care and spay and neuter services. And we want to keep animals in homes and also keep them healthy when they're there.
I didn't even think of the Potter League working to help home issues. Like I always just think of you helping the animals. Recently, a friend of mine told me that their grandmother, who's old, really wanted a cat as a companion, but because she's old, she didn't want to adopt a cat and then leave it as a burden to someone else, or have it go to the pound or the shelter again. Do you ever see that as an issue?
We in terms, so there's two pieces of that question. One is about adoption. So we practice what we call open adoptions, which means we try not to place any barriers in people's way who want a pet. So we try to make a match between the person and the pet. So you tell us what your needs are, and we try to match you up. And if someone maybe is, like you said, is older and is worried about leaving a pet behind, we have, I think the oldest cat we have right now is probably 12, 14 for adoption, which we commonly have. So if you want to get an older pet and because you're worried about that, then that might make sense for you. We wouldn't stop someone because of their age from adopting a kitten if that's what they want. We might just have a conversation with them and say, they're young and rambunctious. I don't know how long you're gonna live. My mother has a cat. She's in her mid 80s. But her cat is her companion. We want people, we saw, if anything, from our perspective that we saw in COVID is animals are incredibly important to people who have difficulty getting out in the world. For years, people were in isolation and the only companionship they had was their pet. And I would hate to say to someone, no matter their age, you shouldn't have that pet because of some external issue that that you feel like should limit you. During that, and we were making a shift towards keeping pets in homes before COVID, but it really accelerated that because of how much more important they became. So I don't want to rule anybody out for any reason say, you can't have a cat because you passed a certain number, because those numbers are constantly becoming less relevant. And the other side of that question is what happens if someone passes away and they have pets. We encourage people to have a plan for their pet if they can, someone who's going to take that animal. If they can't, then they'll probably come, at least if they're on a Clinic Island, they're going to end up at the Potter League and we can find them a home. But hopefully people are talking to their, we have a plan for my mother's cat, if needed. And just like other estate planning, pets should be included in what your plan is. Some people create trusts for the care of their pets, but not necessarily essential if you just have a friend or a family member who wants them, or you're just clear that, I want them to go to the Potter League and they'll adopt them out, or whoever my local shelter is.
That's what they decided. A grandchild would take the cat. So that she
Good.
could get one. But so how do animals typically become residents of the Potter League?
There's a few different ways. So we are the animal shelter for all the municipalities on Aquidneck Island. So if an animal is a stray, or abandoned, or there's a cruelty case, animal control officers can bring animals to us 24 hours a day. They have keys to the buildings. They can come in the middle of the night. And so that they can be surrendered by their owners. So we have a primary focus on Newport County. We give priority to people who can't keep their pets anymore, can always bring them to us. If we have space, we expand that region to Rhode Island residents first. So someone else in Rhode Island can't keep their pet anymore, they need to surrender them. We'll take them directly from folks in Rhode Island. And then because we have enough capacity, we also transfer animals from shelters in both from other parts of Rhode Island, but also other states. So there are quite a few municipal shelters in Rhode Island. So they're town or city run shelters that don't have, say, the veterinary capacity we have. We have a full-time veterinarian who just focuses on the shelter animals. Most of those shelters don't have someone like that. Most of them don't have the adoption success we do. So we'll take animals from shelters in the state, and we also take them from out of state. We recently got some cats from New Jersey. We get dogs from the South. We recently got some dogs from Puerto Rico from the hurricane recovery. I think we're gonna get some cats from Florida to help with that hurricane recovery. So those, and then we temporarily house pets for people in crisis. And I don't know if you want to talk more about that. I know Greg has some familiarity with that program from his past work, but we have a program called Pet Safe for people who are in sort of a variety of different temporary crises. So we get probably the greatest volume of referrals we get are from the hospital. So say someone goes to the hospital, maybe they're going to only be there a night or two, but they have a pet at home, they have nobody to take care of them, so the animal will come here. And those are in large volume, the hospital calls, but short stays typically, because people usually don't stay in the hospital for a very long time. There was a study recently in Michigan, I think it was 13% of pet owners in Michigan hospitals left against medical advice in order to take care of their pets.
Wow.
So you have sick and injured people who are leaving the hospital because nobody's taking care of their pets.
Mhm.
Hopefully that's not happening here, because their pets can come here and they can feel comfortable. They're going to be taken care of. Other, for us, common calls we get are from the Women's Resource Center. Someone's entering their domestic violence shelter. Their pets can come to us while they're there. Homeless shelter, we work with Lucy's Hearth and other homeless shelters. Again, can't have pets in the homeless shelters, so the pets will come here. We are working with someone from Operation Stand Down, which works with veterans. They have a veteran who's coming to us, people who are in addiction recovery. Sometimes if they're in a facility, we'll get folks whose pets will stay with us. So there's a variety of ways they end up with us, sometimes house fires, but more commonly Red Cross tries to find a hotel that'll allow them to take their pets there. And some of those folks will come here and visit their pets all the time. Some of them can't. There are transportation issues or other issues that might prevent them. But one of the important things about that program is these pets are still belong to those people. We're boarding them. It's free. We keep them pretty much as long as they stay in touch with us. We'll keep them for as long as they need them, which has been much longer lately because of housing issues. So someone goes into a homeless shelter, domestic violence shelter, it's become much longer stays for them. But we've had families who come here every day after school and we give them a room and they hang out with their pet. And the kids do their homework and then they go home. And the largest of those needs was when we're also a designated disaster response shelter by the state. So the state's designated 4 shelters around the state to respond to disasters. So when the gas went out a couple of years ago in Newport, we took in about 100 animals from people who didn't have heat, and so that was essentially part of that program. We were so far the only shelter to actually activate under the state's emergency declaration because of the gas outage. But it was a nice test of that plan.
That must be wild.
Yeah.
Right? It must be
wild.
crazy and wild in there with all those animals.
Yeah, I mean, luckily, I guess, the population was not high for us. We had some space. We were ready to move animals out of our shelter to other shelters to make space. So all the animals that we already own, the ones for adoption, we can move somewhere else. So that what's important in that situation is people feel comfortable bringing their animals here and knowing they're going to be close by. They can come by and see them. If I said to people in Newport, yes, you can bring your dog and it's going to end up in Providence across 2 bridges. They're not going to leave their pets here, right? People are sleeping in their cars in order to stay with their pets. And we certainly see that with people experiencing homelessness, that they will not enter the homeless shelter system if it means giving up their pets. Wow. And they will stay in their car or in a tent or wherever they have to stay, and they get pet food from us or other services from us, but they can't enter the system because they're not going to give up their pets to do. Same thing in domestic violence cases.
Right. Wow.
I love that option though, because I could see that being a barrier for people to go into recovery, to go into a domestic violence shelter, and to know that you can go visit and that they're close by and well cared for is a great option.
It is. Now, Brad, you mentioned surrendering pets, like people can come in and just surrender pets. Are there any questions asked, or is it just come on in and you could surrender?
Yeah, and like I said, our hope is to keep families together, and by families I include pets in those families. So when someone calls us and says they can't keep their pet anymore, we're always interested to try to find out why and whether it's a problem that we can help them solve. So, if, for example, my pet is sick and I can't afford veterinary care, well, that's a problem we can solve. Or if they're struggling financially and they can't afford pet food, we can give them pet food. We have a behavior helpline that's free, so we can give people free behavior advice. We have dog trainers on staff that can help them if there's a behavior issue. So there's a lot of resources we can offer to try to keep the pet there. So we will ask those kinds of questions. Is there a way we can help you? The biggest challenge for us, like everyone in Rhode Island right now, I think, is if someone is losing their housing and they don't have a place to go, or they have been forced through circumstances to go somewhere that doesn't allow pets, that becomes a challenge that's hard for us to overcome, just like a lot of other agencies. So in those cases, we'd say, we'll take your pet. And then the questions we asked are really centered around trying to learn as much as we can about that animal and their history, so that we can try to make the best match possible for them when they're ready to go to a home. So if we understand, how they were living before and what they're used to, then we can give people who are coming to adopt just want as much history and information as they can get. And so if we can gather as much as possible, that's helpful in those placements.
Great. Now you've mentioned a few of them. Can you tell us some of the programs and services that you do provide?
Yeah. So first of all, we have, so the Powder League has 3 locations around the state. For the longest time we've been in Newport County. Our animal care center is in Middletown, and there is where we have the animal shelter, the dog training center. We have a humane education program that we run out of here, and we are just getting back into this. Is going to be the first year since COVID that we'll be back in schools, working with kids in the schools. We relaunched our humane education program with our summer camp last summer, and we're back in schools. We also have programs where kids come to us on Saturdays, whether that's Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or just our own education programs where they get more hands-on with animals. And they really experience sort of, in some cases, learn about animal care, but just about their own connection, that feeling they have. Kids just have a natural empathy, I think, for animals, and they can feel that and express that through some of our programs. Then in Warwick, we have a SpayNeuter Clinic. So at the SpayNeuter Clinic, we'll do about 6,000, 6,500 surgeries a year, just spaying and neuter cats and dogs. Typically, there's 2 veterinarians at that clinic a day. And then in Riverside, East Providence, we have a full service veterinary hospital. Again, usually 2 to 3 veterinarians a day there. And that hospital is just like any veterinary clinic you would go to yourself. It has x-ray and surgery and dental care, blood testing in-house, all those things you would see, but the practice is limited to people who either receive public assistance or are disabled veterans are the only ones who can go to that clinic. And so while there are copays, people are paying there about a quarter or a third of what you would pay at a typical private hospital. So we're really just opening up that care to people who have nowhere else that they could possibly access veterinary care. The other veterinary program we have is for Newport residents. We will subsidize veterinary care at private clinics. So we have a grant that helps people afford care if they go to a private hospital here, and that's a combination of folks we meet in Newport and referrals from veterinarians. So they're trying to. We all have mobile wellness clinics. So we recently went to the Martin Luther King Center, provided free vaccines and microchips for some of the clients of their food pantry. We've done that at Newport public housing complexes as well. We're looking at expanding that to some other parts of the state. And the nice thing about those clinics, besides them being free, is it's often the first time that animals have seen a veterinarian. And if we find something else that animal needs, then we can refer them either to our clinic or go to a private clinic and help subsidize those funds. One of the programs that grew the most during COVID was our pet food pantry. So last year we distributed about 40,000 pounds of pet food all over the state. We distributed through all 3 of our locations, but we give a lot to local food pantries. So the Martin Luther King Center has a shelf for pet food. And several food pantries around the state we deliver food to. And during COVID, we started delivering to people's houses, right? People who were especially at risk, who didn't want to leave the house, didn't want to go to a food pantry. We had volunteers who were just driving to people's houses and dropping a bag of food on the porch. We also, for Martin Luther King, follow their mobile food pantry. So if you're familiar with their mobile pantry, they bring food to a community. We park next to them with pet food and give it away right next to them. I probably missed something, but that's
Wow, that work sounds amazing.
Right.
Amazing.
I do see we have a food pantry in Little Compton that I often see what they're in need of or whatever. They connect to the city a lot, and they're always talking about pet food. So I'm glad to hear that you guys have a pantry and that's a common practice. Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to Little Compton, but we could bring them pet food.
Yeah.
If it's a need for them.
I'll reach
The other
out.
thing we've done at a lot of pantries, as you might know, are tiny. Martin Luther King is pretty big, so they can dedicate a shelf. And a lot of the ones we talk to just say, they don't have space for pet food. So in that case, sometimes what we'll do is say, look, on the second Thursday of the month, we're going to bring a van down here. Tell all your clients if they want pet food, that's the day to show up. They can grab a month's supply of pet food. And instead of it's a real challenge for some food pantries are a closet in a church, right? That's the pantry. So for them, it's not practical to store pet food. So we work that out with some other places too.
That's awesome.
Great.
Can you tell us about the importance of spaying and neutering your pets? I feel like you need to be like best Bob Barker right now.
Yeah, well, I will say that pet overpopulation is totally preventable. And
Love that.
I did it. So we, like I said, we have a spay and neuter clinic, a clinic that totally dedicated to spay and neuter in Warwick, and every animal that is adopted from a dog, cat, and rabbit adopted from us at the shelter is spayed or neutered before they go home. Of course, the reason that our animal shelter is here is primarily because there are more pets than there are people to adopt them, especially in some other states. We've been pretty successful in Rhode Island about cutting down on pet overpopulation, in large part because we have this high volume spay and neuter clinic that is inexpensive, that's very accessible. If you call your veterinarian and you feel like it's not affordable, our clinic is price has been rising. So I think our clinic is probably between a quarter and a third of what a private veterinarian would charge. Plus, if you need it, we have grants that can lower the price even more. So we want spay and neuter to be accessible. And, because we're in Warwick, we're about 40 minutes from 90% of the population. It's not of the state. So it's a pretty accessible spot. We're just a little north of the airport. But the reason that we are getting animals from other states is because they just haven't been as successful yet at cutting down that on overpopulation. So certainly on a global scale, spay and neuter is important, because if we don't spay and neuter our pets, we could end up again in a situation where we're going to have too many. There are also just positive health benefits for your pet. There are cancers that you're going to avoid by spaying or neutering your pet. Certainly testicular cancer in males and mammary cancer in females. Breeding. When we see pets that have been bred multiple times, we see some other really challenging issues, medical issues that can both be just hard on the animal but expensive to overcome. And there's some behavior benefits as well to spaying and neutering your pet. So, I encourage everybody, I think pretty much every veterinarian you're going to talk to, if you go to your veterinarian, is going to say your pet should be spayed or neutered. There are very few are there people who are showing their dog somewhere and they're, so they're, this very small sliver of people who might have a reason to not spay or neuter, or there are medical reasons not to, but veterinarians are broadly in agreement that this is the best option for your pet. So it's a conversation you should have with them. And I think all of them will encourage you to do it. It heads off so many health issues down the road, as well as the issue of just having too many animals and those unplanned litters.
Actually, you partially answered this question, but because I always hear spay and neuter your cats and dogs, but you did say rabbits as well. Can you spay or neuter any pet, or is it just?
Well, I think technically it is possible. Some of them are much more challenging than others. I mean, rabbits are actually much more challenging than dogs and cats. I mean, you're talking about when you're spaying a female rabbit, their reproductive organs are a significant part of their internal organs. So it's a major surgery. Spays especially are major surgery. I've worked with veterinarians who have neutered rats and guinea pigs, and those are not surgeries that the majority of veterinarians are comfortable performing. And each animal has their own. Rabbits can have a challenging surgical recovery. Anesthesia protocols are different. So we only spay and neuter dogs and cats at our clinic in Warwick for the public, partially because of those challenges around different species and because of the volume, we can't keep up really with the volume we have right now. So the rabbits we're spaying and neutering at the shelter before adoption.
Wow.
And we have seen since the beginning of COVID throughout New England, a spike in rabbits and guinea pigs coming into shelters.
Wow. Oof. Hope my kids listen to that because they were asking for hamsters and guinea pigs this last weekend.
I would choose guinea pigs are great pets for kids. I would say if you're looking for a first
You're
pet
supposed
for
to
your
say
kids,
fish, Brad. You're supposed to say fish.
no. The fish in our house are the hardest ones to you got the filters and the water changing and all. I mean, fish are a lot of work. Guinea pigs, you have to clean them up, but they're small and they're usually, if you handle them, they're friendly and you can socialize them. I think guinea pig, the hardest part about guinea pigs is, they live 4 to 5 years. So your kids are going to have a hard time with the shorter lifespan, but
don't want to say
but
that.
I think, but they're small, they're contained, they're friendly. And so I think guinea pigs are a really good small kid starter pet.
I think that's a great pet. for
No.
Some kids.
Yeah.
No,
You want me to bring one over, Greg?
not at all.
Three.
No.
They all need one.
So back to our questions. When it comes to pet adoption, what should the community know beforehand? Before they come in?
Our approach to pet adoption is just trying to make good matches. So we are really open to whatever your circumstances are. We just want to hear it, and we're going to tell you everything we know about the animals that we have and try to find you a pet that matches what you want. So if you're somebody who wants to sit at home and doesn't want to walk dogs constantly or exercise them, then we're not going to get you a 1-year-old Jack Russell Terrier because they're just going to run circles around you and probably drive you mad. But if you're someone who wants that, who wants exercise, who wants engagement, who wants to enact more active, then that might be the right animal for you. So we're just trying to make that connection. So I would say when you're coming in and looking for a pet, just be open and honest with us about what those needs are, about your living situation, about what you're looking for, and we will be the same about the pets and plan to spend some time. I mean, dogs and cats, you're talking about, if they're young, you're talking about 10 or 15 years in your house. So take your time, spend some time with them and get to know them. And then really, I think where we shine is post-adoption. We really want to support people. So if you're having an issue, we have trainers on staff who are going to help you work through issues. Animals coming out of any situation can be stressed. So they need time to kind of decompress. There have been some studies about cortisol levels in pets leaving shelters, and really, it takes about 3 months before their cortisol levels really stabilize and become normal. And we hear that from people like, oh, I feel like he's really settled in and became a different dog or cat after a few months. And it's really, there are chemical changes happening, probably just like in people, right? When they're stressed or go in a different situation, you start settling in. And that happens with animals too. So we try to help people work through that adjustment period. And honestly, some of them come in, they plop down on the couch, they're good, right? From day one. Yeah. But that's not the majority, right? Most of them need an adjustment period. I would say even more so cats than dogs. Cats become very tied to their place in addition to their people, and they need to settle to a place. So it's not unusual for your cat to hide under the bed for a little while before they start adjusting. So we really encourage people, if you're having issues, the post-adoption discussions and support are just as important as before you take an animal. And if it's just not going to work, that's okay too. For 30 days, we offer 100% no excuses. You can have your You can have your adoption feedback, bring the animal back, we'll give you the adoption feedback. If it didn't work, we don't want to put a barrier in the way of you saying it didn't work because, because of a financial reason. If it's not working, it's not working. You can tell us why. We learn something about the animal, we learn something about what your needs are, and we can try to adjust to that. But we really want to make those adoptions work before and after. And if it's just not going to happen, then we can work with that too.
Are there some popular misconceptions about rescues in general, or rescue animals that you'd like to clear up?
Well, I think for the animals, it's that somehow they're damaged, or I will say sometimes we brought this upon ourselves, right? So the stories you see on TV are always about animals in horrible conditions, or they've been rescued from some cruelty case, or we'll send you a newsletter that says here's this animal that was terribly ill and rescued him. And so that's what most people hear about pets, but that's really a tiny minority. I mean, the reason they're on the news is because it's so unusual for that to happen. Most of them are perfectly healthy and friendly. They don't need months and months of recovery. They come in because almost all the time, it was the circumstances of the people that caused them to need to be here. And the pets were perfectly fine. So I think when it comes to the pets, the most common misconception is that they're here because there was something wrong with them. And usually they were here because people found themselves in difficult circumstances, like a housing issue, and they love their pet, but they're stuck because, maybe they have a Section 8 voucher, and the only place they can use it, which is almost nowhere in Rhode Island right now, is at a place that doesn't allow pets. So they're choosing between, their kids living in the car, or, living under a roof. So, if that's the choice you have to make, it's a choice you have to make, but it wasn't, the pet wasn't the cause of that issue, and the pet didn't do anything wrong. And that's the vast majority of what we see in shelters. And the other piece about the shelters, at least in our case, is that it's somehow going to be difficult to get an animal. Like, as I described in our process, we want to make it a friendly and welcoming experience to find the pet that's right for you. For us, every organization is different. So I think if you're adopting from a different group, you need to talk to them about what their process is. But for us, we're not sort of screening people for whether they're references, or checking with your landlord, or checking on some people want to find out who your employer is. None of that stuff is happening at the Potter League. We're really just trying to get to know people and help them make the best match for them, and then support them afterwards.
That's great.
Tinder for pets.
Yeah. Okay. Wouldn't have put it that way, but all right.
It's important to have a good connection with your pet,
I
right?
agree. I agree.
Yeah.
I see a dog swiping left now.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
No.
Yep.
That'd be,
Well, I mean, my experience has been that people make a connection, right? So if you feel connected to an animal, people who feel that connection will do anything for them, right? It's more about that feeling of connection will tell you how successful they're going to be, because people will overcome all kinds of challenges in order to keep a pet with them that they just feel that connection to.
Right. So for people who want to become involved with the Potter League, or want to get in contact with the Potter League, what opportunities do you have, and how do they best get in touch with you?
Easiest way is through our website, potterleague.org. And we have all sorts of great volunteer opportunities, both working with the animals or not working with the animal. But we have a pretty robust volunteer program at all 3 sites. So no matter where you are in the state, there's some place close to you can volunteer. And you'll see on that website there's volunteer orientations and training, and the training just you take, it depends on what you want to do. So certainly the most popular is working with the dogs and cats, but we have volunteers who come in every morning and they clean and care for the animals. They're walking the dogs, they're socializing the cats, and there's a progression through that system all the way up to people who are working on behavior modification for some really intensely challenged animals, most commonly animals that are extremely fearful and shy. So we work with them for weeks and sometimes months. And it's, these better trained volunteers who have more experience are really essential in that program. We have volunteers who help us with surgery, not actually doing surgery, but help us in the background around our surgical programs, in our humane education program, administrative support. They're answering the phones, they're working the front desk, and our volunteers are doing just about everything that our staff is doing in one way or another. So we love having volunteers come in. They're really essential to the work we're doing, and we have volunteers helping with marketing, posting our TikToks for us.
You're not doing the TikToks?
I'm not doing TikTok. Not really.
What's the most unusual animal you've had?
Oh, unusual. Well, we'll take any animal that fits in your house, is what we always say. So we don't have a barn, so no horses, no livestock. But we had a bearded dragon recently. Wow. Probably the reptiles are the things that people feel are the most unusual, but they're in people's houses. Mm-hmm. We do get pretty consistently, we get small birds. Once in a while, we'll get someone big, like a big parrot. For those animals, there are groups that specialize in those animals. We'll often transfer them quickly to those groups. But I mean, we've had goats and chickens, and some, if they'll fit in the kennel and they're here on the island, they end up coming in.
All right.
Well,
I was going to say, make sure you let us know when you have 3 guinea pigs available.
Oh, we've got them right now.
Oh, all right.
I'll remember this. So I have to ask for my son. He'd like to know, what do you have more of, cats or dogs?
We have more cats than dogs. So cats are number one in terms of volume. Part of that is just because we have more. Cats are smaller, so we have more space for cats. So it's cats first, then dogs, then rabbits are in terms of the volume of animals. But in terms of growth, rabbits are catching up fast, and we're seeing a lot of cats come in.
Wow.
Maybe a cat in your future.
Not at all. Yeah. A fish. That's about it.
Cats are great too. Do you need a kitten or adult cat? Whatever you need for cats.
I've been dreaming about kitties lately. Maybe because the Thompson kids were going to.
The Thompson kids do not need that. And we now know that Brad won't be on the housewarming list. He'll come, whatever. Pet.
Oh yeah, we can get you a cat. Actually, there's a myth around not giving animals as gifts, and there was a study years ago that showed that looked at how long people kept animals based on how they acquired them, and people who received animals as a gift were the most likely to keep them for life. So maybe I should just
you're
gift Greg.
You're killing our friendship here. You're killing it.
If a mysterious box shows up here with holes in it, we'll know what's going on.
Wow. Well, Brad, thank you very much for being our guest. We really appreciate it. I know my kids are really going to appreciate it as well.
Yes, thank you. Learned a lot.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure to be on.
All right, you take care now.
Great to see you. I'm Holly, and you've just listened to Totally Preventable.